Hello and welcome. You're watching another episode of Maunalua, Past, Present, and Future. My name is Kendrick Chang. I'm a youth advisor for Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, and today I'll be serving as the host of this episode. And today we're going to learn more about the summer field work and happenings at the Keawavawa wetland, and to learn more about the endangered ʻAlaeʻula bird, the Hawaiian moorhen. Joining me today is actually a couple familiar faces. We have Charles Van Rees and Amanda Sandor. Welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Now, let's start with Charles. I mean, it's been quite about 4 years. So what has been going on since we last been on the show?
So the latest updates. 2016, 2017 was kind of a really big year for the ʻAlaeʻula project. So I started working with the Hui just as another one of my field sites 4 years ago for my dissertation research, which pertains to the distribution and ecology of this endangered bird on Oahu, and started just chatting more with the volunteers and the people running the Hui and the people managing the wetland. And we sort of started this kind of collaboration where I could serve as sort of an advising ecologist and use my scientific knowledge and the work I'm doing on the ʻAlaeʻula to help the organization and their goals, specifically in managing the property for ʻAlaeʻula. And that's sort of blossomed recently into applying for some funding and support to really expand efforts regarding the conservation of this bird and sort of transform Keawavawa into something more like a flagship wetland to kind of represent wetland conservation as a whole and the ʻAlaeʻula as an endangered species and a part of Hawaii's natural heritage. And so what ended up happening this year was we applied for and were awarded a conservation grant from the Disney Conservation Fund, which is really just a tremendous source of support. And prior to my return this spring, there's just been a tremendous amount of work done throughout the winter and the early spring, promoting outreach and a lot of conservation education on the island. So that's been a really major thing for me. And coming back now and sort of bringing the science component back this year, I'm also coming with, I was working in the lab and on the computer the last few months, processing the data we've been collecting on the island and also finding some pretty substantial and interesting new scientific information we never had before on this bird and its behaviors that I think is also going to contribute substantially to the way we conserve them and protect them into the future. So really, really exciting year, I would say, to say the least.
All right. Yeah, now, Amanda, you're the project coordinator for this Disney grant. I mean, how exciting is this? And, particularly, what is your connection to the wetland and the ʻAlaeʻula bird?
So my connection, I was Charles' assistant for the last 2 years, and after his field season ended, I continued working with the Hui and started leading Second Saturdays, which are community work days. And so as the grant kind of got rolling and everything, I turned into the program coordinator. And so I organize all of our outreach events and help coordinate volunteers. I still lead Second Saturday. And yeah, so I kind of am in charge of all these different aspects of the grant, and then we've had a lot of events lately with different areas around the island doing outreach events, and I can talk a little bit more about that, but that's kind of my current involvement with the Hui.
Yeah, and speaking on that, I mean, we have one, side for us, the community outreach, and then we have the research side. So, Charles, can you expand more about the type of research work you're doing through this grant?
Sure. So specific to the grant, the big interests are, at first, the work I've been doing for my dissertation, which pertains more to what we call habitat connectivity. So that's really about, we have all these small islands of wetland habitat across Oahu. We're interested in finding whether or not those are connected to one another based on the movement of these ʻAlaeʻula, and are they able to get around the island? So tracking their movements is a huge part still, and we're continuing that study because that's very difficult science. It takes a very long time to collect that sort of information. The other major thing that we're interested in really formalizing now from the research perspective is also quantifying what makes good habitat for ʻAlaeʻula.
Right.
So also saying, okay, well, we know that they like wetlands, but what about them? What makes a good wetland for them? How can we manage, for example, Keawavawa or any other wetland on the island to make it better habitat for them, to protect them so they can have more babies so the population can be going stronger? And to really help benefit the sort of active management going on all over the island to give it sort of a more scientific and solid basis. And so those are the two main things that we're working on.
Yeah, and then, I mean, to show the progress we've done so far, and we do have some photos on the screen that we can show. And As far as, the ʻAlaeʻula bird, you do a lot of banding, and then right now on the screen is you actually holding the ʻAlaeʻula.
Okay.
And then, what makes it so important for the ʻAlaeʻula to, be dependent on the wetlands as their habitat?
So what specifically do we think makes good habitat right now? So we haven't really collected enough or analyzed enough data at this point to have super conclusive evidence. But what we are seeing very strongly so far with what we have done is that it's less about having certain plants or a certain amount of area. But what we are seeing is that within an area, what makes a big difference is what we're calling the interspersion of habitat types. So what we see is rather than just having a whole bunch of water in one place and a whole bunch of large plants in one place, if those are mixed together, if they're sort of scattered and patchy within the confines of the wetland, that makes a lot more birds. We see a lot more there. The reproductive success is higher, and their nesting densities are higher. And of course, we have to figure out mechanistically why that's the case, right? It's not necessarily clear to us why there are more birds in those types of areas, but we are seeing that correlation, which tells us, okay, if we then manage Keawava that way, and we do change sort of the distribution of the plants versus the open water and the bare ground, that might help us support a greater number of these endangered birds in that property.
And an important component of this Disney grant is the community outreach. And Amanda, you've been leading the charge on that outreach, and we also have more photos to share of the types of events you've been doing. Has it been fun going out in the community and just sharing more about the ʻAlaeʻula and the Keawava wetland?
Yeah, it's been really awesome. We kind of started off in February with World Wetlands Day. We had a talk story event at the Oahu Club, which is right next to Keawava, which is really great because it's so visible and so many people can see it. And so this is our World Wetlands Day event. We have Marty Kawasaki speaking here about wetlands and about her research. And this is myself and a grad student and Marty talking. We were the speakers for the day. So that was kind of our kickoff event for the grant. And then we had a few other outreach events. We always meet after, and we do monthly meetings as well to talk about everything and plan everything, and just see how we can kind of connect the birds back to the community members. So these are all photos of our youth advisors coming out. There's Kendrick there. Some of our other youth advisors and our other community members coming out to meet with us and just plan things going forward and see where we're going to go and how we can assess what we've already done, pros and cons, how can we change things, how can we adapt what we're doing to the next event and the different demographics that are going to be there. So this was our second event. This is at Bishop Museum. It's called, it was Fall in Love with Science, and we like to always say that we only have eyes for ʻAlaeʻula. So this is our first event. You can see our wheel of wetlands in the background, that rainbow wheel. You spin the wheel, we ask a question, kids get candy. It kind of helps keep even little kids engaged. And we had little crafts for them as well. So we have just different factors to keep different groups engaged with what we're doing and kind of figure out ways to connect the ʻAlaeʻula back to people that might not even have ever heard of the bird before. So we do face painting. We have ʻAlaeʻula hats for little kids as well. They can make them. We did a social media contest. This was our winner. We have people post a selfie with ʻAlaeʻula glasses on that we have, and they can win a T-shirt or something like that. So we have something different every time, and it's really fun to see how it changes and see how different the events can be. This was at the zoo, and you can see actually on our table we have a stuffed ʻAlaeʻula toy representing haka, which is my personal favorite ʻAlaeʻula from Oahu Club. So these are a couple pictures from our zoo event doing Endangered Species Day, and just there representing the ʻAlaeʻula and just telling people why they're important, why we love them so much, why they're so culturally relevant. And these are some of our other community members. This is Marty Kawasaki again. She was our speaker on World Wetlands Day, and I've done research with her before, and then she also has been coming out for our outreach events. So it's really cool to kind of see how the group's been growing, and we've had veteran volunteers coming out. We have different community members come out. So there's a lot going on, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so speaking on, community volunteers and, those who are also part of the wetland team, how important is it for everyone to, contribute in every area, especially since you're the one who's kind of implementing this, grant and program from an overall picture? What do you see that makes this team special?
I think it's great because we have people from all different sides of everything. So I've done the ecology side of things. Marty is currently doing the ecology side, but with different species, including the ʻAlaeʻula. We have community members that have worked for Disney. We have somebody there for social media, somebody there for PR stuff. We have Marty LaPrade, who's a teacher, so we have the education side, which is really huge for us. And we have connections with Conservation Council for Hawaii, so they bring in their expertise and their ideas, which are, it's just really great to get different perspectives from all different members of the community and all different demographics. So it's been really interesting to see how it changes every time.
Yeah, awesome. And then we can't really do that without, the deliverables that Charles brings from his research. And my question for you is, what changes have you seen over the course of your research, particularly at the Keawavawa wetland? So
we were sort of working at Keawavawa over time. One of the major things I've seen, I think we talked about this last year as well, was that the volunteer involvement and participation and just the sheer volume of work going through there has been increasing dramatically. I mean, every time I come back, the landscape seems more loved and more worked on, more beautiful, more new native plants have been put there and installed, and more invasives have been removed, and it's been cleaned up. There's less trash. It always looks better. And that's always just really impressed me and made me really happy. But beyond that, what I've also seen was, I think this occurred mostly last year, was we decided to sort of try an impromptu pilot restoration, right? So we had these ideas coming out of my research on what sort of things might make the wetland better for ʻAlaeʻula. And at one point during the winter, it was done when I wasn't here, and some restoration was done. And sure enough, within I don't know, a few months, one of the offspring, one of Hako's sons, moved from the Oahu Club side of Keawavawa over to the Heiau side where this restoration had been done, and a female came from we have no idea where. She showed up from someplace else on the island, and then they were all of a sudden breeding there, and there was all of a sudden a second breeding pair in the wetland, which of course doubles your reproductive rates and does huge things for the populations. And now you guys have two separate territories within the wetland, which is huge. And the conservation investment was very small. People pulled a couple square yards of bulrush and they planted some ʻaeʻae, and boom, there's a whole new territory, and you've doubled. You have way more birds around. Wow, it's incredible. So so in that sense, what I've seen so far has just been incredibly promising, with respect to the type of restoration we can do and how easy some of this really is, and to use Keawavawa as a flagship, like I was saying, to be able to demonstrate so clearly the things we can do and how easy they are at Keawavawa. That's what's really been impressing me, I think, over the last year. Those are sort of the changes that have most excited me.
Yeah, no, and it's quite interesting. You did bring up about the volunteer work to clear out some of the bulrush, and this has been one of the products, or let's say results, that we've seen from Amanda's community outreach and what we've been doing. And one key component is the second Saturdays, monthly cleanups at the Keawavawa wetland. So I mean, what has changed about the second Saturdays, Amanda, since all this community outreach, and what this grant has brought to our organization?
So we've seen a lot of changes for Second Saturday, at least I have. Since we started doing our outreach, we've started getting different groups coming out. We've always had high school clubs coming out. We've had just friends. We've had families come out with us, and we've seen a lot more. We'll recognize people from our events, and they'll tell us about.
Yes, which we do also even have some photos of the second Saturday cleanups. Which what makes it important is that we are just along Hawaii Kai Drive, in a heavily used street in Hawaii Kai. I mean, as far as aesthetically, and we do see a lot of familiar volunteers. But besides that familiarity with some of our volunteers, what brings new groups to the cleanups?
So one of the things we offer, we can sign off for community hours and things like that. So that's really attractive to people, I think, and it just gets people that maybe their friend needs hours for class or something, so they'll bring their friends with them. And we do have a lot of student groups that come out. We actually recently connected with a group from UH Manoa. They send us exchange students from Japan, so we're kind of going international now. So we have all these really great groups coming out. We have different clubs from a lot of the different high schools. We did an Earth Fest event at Kaiser High School, so we have classes from them coming out. And so we've seen a lot of success with that. This is a group of friends here.
Yeah, So yeah, even in the rain, I mean, you know, I just went to the most recent second Saturday earlier in June, and you know, usually it's nice and sunny, but we even get people out during the rain.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're there, rain or shine, and it's really nice sometimes when we get help with the watering of the plants. And so it's really great because we always do a bird tour to kind of break up the morning. It's about 3 hours of work. So we always do a bird tour about halfway through and go see that area with the pilot restoration. We go see where they live now in their territory and talk about the chicks they had a few months ago. And this is Lucas. He's one of our veteran volunteers, and he has come out and he brings native plants with him that he grows on his own farm, and he'll plant them with us. And then we also have our own that we bring too. And so this is actually a mother and daughter that came out and they biked there, which was really great to see.
So a lot of families that comes out.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this was a family that had a lot of fun with the mud that was created from the rain this past Saturday. And one of our cultural advisors brought her grandkids with her, and this little girl, she was really excited. She wanted to show one of our youth advisors the ʻAlaeʻula. She came with me to look at them, and then afterwards she wanted to show him where they lived. So, you know, we're just starting them young and getting everybody really to fall in love with the ʻAlaeʻula. And this is a bunch of our volunteers working on the walkway, weeding and putting the rocks out, and just really beautifying that area. So these are a few of our seasoned volunteers, and one of the really great things about having people that come back every month is, or every couple of months, is that they're really good at self-managing. So we have people that are willing to take on, you know, I really want to improve this area, I really want to weed this area, or we want to pull bulrush here. They'll take charge of that, and they'll take a few volunteers. And this is one of our seasoned volunteers, Carl, having people help pull the bulrush out from a certain area. And it's really great. We always try to do the education orientation in the beginning. We do a bird tour, and we also do the education about Keavava and the history of the place and the culture of the area, the heiau that's there, and the petroglyphs. So when we have a cultural advisor, which is every month, we do have that education side of it. So we try to make sure that we're giving back to the people that are giving so much to us with their hard work.
Yes. I know, and that's awesome, and you know, and that's the photo of the Boy Scouts coming out. And I mean, now going back to Charles' side with the research, as you know, this is kind of like a pilot project for us, the restoration, volunteer work we're doing, and you coming on site to see the change that's been made to the, and the ʻAlaeʻula's behavior. What do you see this, from this, pilot project? Where do you see this, becoming?
Well, certainly, I mean, one of the things that is substantially missing from a lot of conservation science nowadays is that the science takes a very long time,
right?
And we're sort of more on the applied side. We're trying to do things about it, but that can take us years to have the information we need to act upon it. And so, and oftentimes the funding isn't there to do all that research. And so, there's a big push nowadays in the conservation community, especially the conservation biology community, for what they call evidence-based conservation. So we're trying really hard to always be implementing management strategies that have some very clear empirical support. We've seen them tried somewhere, or we've seen evidence somewhere that they do something good. There's actually an impact. So then, okay, well now we can better justify spending however much money on trying to do that, however much time. And so the real value of what's been happening at Keavava with these sort of really low-cost, community-oriented restorations and this sort of effort in this pilot project that we've seen this immediate ecological response to, what we're getting then is really top-notch evidence-based conservation work. And we're getting very, very clear evidence that this stuff can work. And so for me, the value I see in it is now, we really have a strong case that we can make to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to whoever that is doing this type of work. They've been looking for very clear, strategies that they can implement to better manage their properties, which are oftentimes far larger, their resources, which are oftentimes far more substantial, to implement these towards benefiting the population.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I mean, you're not the only observer out there. I mean, anyone in the community can participate in observing as far as the ʻAlaeʻula's movements, and right on our screen is the website.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, a big part of this, of course, is that, the more eyes, the better. And so, if we're trying to understand this connectivity issue, which, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, is a very it's very hard science. It's difficult to get that information to track these birds. They're known to be sort of very sneaky and hard to see, and that's of course something we've known since prior to European contact. This was something that was in the Polynesian lore and Polynesian understanding of the ecology as well. These birds are very sneaky. So we're trying to track them around the landscape. We're putting these color bands on their legs so people can see them in different places. And the website that we were just showing, it has a major contribution to that, which is that's sort of a hub for people who want to go and look for these birds. They can tell us where they've seen them, and that information gets added directly to a database that we are using all the time for this research that's going to really benefit the bird in the future.
And for those our viewers, what is the website link?
I don't think I can remember the whole thing. It's sites.tufts.edu/Hawaiian moorhen. I think something like that. Actually, that might have been it exactly. But you can it's off of my website. You can get it off of the Tufts University website. It might be linked on the Hawaii Kai Hui website. And yeah, it should be on all our materials and things like that. But so it's one specific hub where people can go. It'll give you information on where to find ʻAlaeʻula on the island, how to look for them, how to record information if you see their bands, and of course it includes a nice little app where you can just go in and say, okay, I saw this bird in this place.
And I mean, of course, your research is solely focused on one endangered species in Hawaii. And from the work that you've been putting in and the research and findings, do you think this could apply to potentially other bird species or just generally any other endangered species? That's maybe not even necessarily, in other places across the nation or even the world.
Sure. I mean, there are several things that make the ʻAlaeʻula sort of generalizable and applicable to a lot of other situations. And certainly the thing that I tend to think about the most when I'm trying to pitch this research to people and I'm trying to discuss why it's more broadly applicable is that Hawaii is a very unique place, and the ecology we're dealing with here is also is very unique in that we're in a place that is ecologically tropical.
Right.
We're dealing with a situation of incredibly rapid economic and economic growth and landscape change. These are all things that we tend to get in a lot of other parts of the world that are considerably more economically disadvantaged. But here, of course, it's the nature of Hawaii's unique history that we had these rapid changes. And so at the same time, we're part of the United States, right? So we have all this extra information, we have all this money for management, we have all these data and resources that you don't have in a lot of these other parts of the world. And so what we have then is we can look at a system that behaves a lot like places where conservation issues are really, really substantial all over the world, but we have information we can use to understand those issues that we don't have elsewhere. So I think a lot of the work we're doing here on the endangered wetland birds and things like that can be applying to wetland ecosystems, to situations of fragmented habitat all over the world, and we can really be learning a lot. So not only how to approach these things ecologically, but also to how to apply it, especially with the work that you guys are doing at the Hui here, is how do we approach these conservation issues from a grassroots standpoint? How do we get the community involved, and how do we really have these substantial impacts combining the science and really getting it out there? And I find that tremendously inspiring.
No, and that's really quite interesting that, with even though Hawaii has a particular ecosystem that, what we're doing to preserve and protect the ʻAlaeʻula, that this could potentially be used as far as our findings and strategies.
Yeah,
elsewhere.
I think so. I think it's tremendously applicable. It's a really valuable place, and this might be the only place we could be doing this kind of work. So.
Right. Yeah, no, man, I mean, the Disney grant, this is actually a year-long grant, and then, we're only about 4 to 5 months in. So what's lying ahead of us, I mean, as far as potential future events that we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. So we have a few talk story events coming up. They're going to be at the Oahu Club, and we're going to have different speakers and different community partners there doing outreach and education and possibly some activities for kids, that kind of thing. And so that'll be throughout the summer. And then we also have, we'll be at the Hawaii Conservation Conference, and that's a huge deal for us. That's going to be really great. We're going to have our outreach toolbox there, is what we like to call it. It's all of our things that we have. Yeah, so that's what we have at all of our outreach events, is all the same items, and it does change every time, but for the most part, there's these key items that we bring with us, and that's something that has been facilitated by having this grant and having all these events. And so we also are going to be culminating our grant. There's going to be a lot more events as time goes on, but we're going to be culminating the grant with another World Wetlands Day celebration in February 2018, and we're hoping to really kick it up and have it be a big event with a lot of community partners there.
And it's not going to be on World Wetland Day, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we do have a couple more minutes, so I mean, just to top it off, Charles, do you have anything to add to culminate as far as, I mean, the work you've been doing is, you're still in the field work research here in Hawaii during the summer months.
I guess one thing I could add, in which we can, I'm sure we can talk more about it later, but just in terms of, this is one of those things that I just find so exciting that I can't necessarily, it's hard for me to hold it back, but it's all ecology nerd stuff, so I apologize in advance to the viewers out there if it's too nerdy, but essentially one of the major things that has been coming out of my research in the last just few months before I came back to the island was I was running a lot of analyses on the genetic data that we collected on these birds all around the island, which we talked about in past episodes. And interestingly, you can use those data to try to understand how the birds are getting around based on looking at how their genes are moving, right? Because when the birds move, they're typically also, their genes are moving as well, right? And what we've been seeing is we've had all these ideas about how the birds get around the island, and interestingly, the only thing that we see very strongly supported by those data is that these birds are using linear water features to get around. So they're moving along river corridors, along drainage swales, and water infrastructure to get around. So it shows us that those things act as corridors that can help the birds get from one island to one sort of habitat island, so to speak, one patch of their wetlands to the other, which is something we never knew about before. We had no idea how they were getting from place to place. And it seems like they're using these corridors as sort of the easiest way to get across the Oahu's landscape. So that's pretty fascinating and new. And I could talk at length about it, but that's probably my biggest interesting, exciting plug coming out of the science side, is that we're really starting to get into the ecology of this very mysterious bird with the work we've been doing. And you know, it takes a few years, but now it's starting to come out, and it's really
And I'm afraid we run out of time, but thank you, Charles.
Of course, thank you.
And of course, again, it's a pleasure, Amanda. Thank you for taking the time. And finally, we would like to thank Ōlelo Studios at Kaimuki High School for putting this episode together. And this is Kendrick Chang from Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, signing off on another episode of Maunalua, Past, Present, and Future. Thank you.